Okay, we're gonna get this panel started. As we just talked about, the fuel cycle depends on secure supplies of uranium, enrichment, fabrication, and advanced fuels. This next panel will explore how to strengthen and diversify the fuel cycle to ensure reliable, affordable, and timely deployment of nuclear energy. I'm gonna let our panelists introduce themselves before we dive in.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Abby, and thank you to the Western Governors Association. Of course, Governor Cox, appreciate your pulling this all together. So my name is Curtis Moore, and I'm the Senior VP of Marketing and Corporate Development for a company called Energy Fuels. We're headquartered in Denver, Colorado, and we are currently the largest supplier of uranium in the United States. So uranium, of course, is the very first step in the production of nuclear energy, at least for the vast majority of nuclear technologies. You need the stuff that we produce. So we produce uranium in Arizona, in Utah, also in Wyoming. Those are some of the best uranium mining and uranium production areas in the United States. We also are the owner of the only conventional uranium mill in the United States. If you go back 30, 40, 50 years, there were on the order of 25 or 30 uranium mills in the United States. Today there's one, and we own it. It has been a long slog. It's been a very difficult industry market for us over those many years, as things like Fukushima happened that really depressed the uranium market. Countries like Russia, like Kazakhstan, increased production and also increased a lot of imports into the United States. That has created a lot of challenges for companies like us. Now, we have been able to keep the company going, keep the workforce together. We currently have about 100 employees down at the White Mesa Mill in southeast Utah. Plus another 100 employees at our various mines around the country. But it is a very good time for us right now. Nuclear utilities are coming back into the market. There are efforts to, there was a Russian uranium ban that was passed a couple of years ago. That was a big boost to our industry. We have contracts with the domestic utilities, and we're delivering into those contracts today. We deliver our material to a conversion facility. Conversion is the next step in the nuclear fuel cycle, where you essentially take our natural uranium concentrate and you gasify it. You refine it and gasify it and create this uranium hexafluoride that would then be delivered to Mary's facility, for instance. So that's where we fit in.
Yes. Thank you. I'm Josh Jarrell. I am the director of our nuclear fuel cycle science and technology here at Idaho National Lab. So welcome. I hope you've enjoyed your visit. It's great to have this group here and to be part of the panel. I'll just maybe quickly touch on a few things on the fuel cycle and what INL is doing. Maybe I'll start with INL. And I am a contractor for the Department of Energy, but I do not represent the Department of Energy. So as we talk about some of the federal policy, I will not be speaking for DOE by any means. But from a fuel cycle perspective, here at INL, we are looking at ways to help deploy technologies, demonstrate technologies that can move the fuel cycle forward, whether that's in mining, conversion, enrichment, deconversion, and then on the backside, do we consider recycling the fuel? Do we store it? Do we dispose of it? Like these sort of things. And so INL, as a national laboratory, our job is really to move technology to market and to help some of these companies with these technologies, demonstrate them so that they can sort of get them over the hump and deploy them. And I think it's really important as we start seeing nuclear energy and such a huge amount of interest, both from private and federal customers with nuclear energy, that we don't forget about the nuclear fuel cycle. And that's something that in the past has been a struggle. And I think it's something that we'll need to continue to really focus on. So I'm thrilled to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Mary Newmeyer, and I lead U.S. government affairs for the Urenco Group. Urenco is the largest Western supplier of uranium enrichment services. We operate a plant in New Mexico in the United States. It's the only commercial enrichment facility in the United States. We also operate plants in the UK, the Netherlands, and Germany. In the United States, we've been operating since 2010, producing enriched uranium, and over the years we have expanded our operations to meet market demand, customer needs. As the market declined in the late 2018 timeframe, we stopped building out our facility, but following the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, there has been an increased demand for non-Russian fuel. So based on contracts and customer demand, we have been expanding our facility in New Mexico. We've also been expanding our facilities in Europe. Just a word about our facilities, just following up on the discussion earlier and the talk about the workforce. We are located in southeastern New Mexico. It's in the Permian Basin. It's sometimes called the energy plex because you have oil, gas, wind, solar, nuclear. And as part of our efforts since 2010, we have really, we regard it as a great privilege to be in the community we are in, Eunice, New Mexico. We are located near Hobbs. We're also very close to Andrews, Texas. And one of the things we really have prioritized is the development of the workforce. And we actually have a program, we'll just talk about education. We actually have a program for fifth graders, which we call the Ritchie Enrichment Program. And our employees go out and meet with students, in fifth grade students, really, I think 1,800 students a year. And we'll give them a little bit of an introduction to nuclear. We also have in Hobbs a technical school. It actually opened a number of years ago, and I think Mike Rowe came for the grand opening. But it's a wonderful school. It's intended to help develop skills. So we helped sponsor the technical school. We also work with the junior college on a degree program, and then we also have an internship program at the site. So we are now at the point where we actually have some of those fifth graders coming to work at the site. So that's been really a wonderful way to help cultivate a local workforce, which has been really so important to our facility. So in all events, very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. The Western Governors, wonderful organization. I know from my past life and working on Capitol Hill how important it is. And anyway, just very grateful to be here. Thank you.
And I'm Chris Lowe. I'm the CEO at Nusano. Thank you very much for having me to be a part of this today. Nusano is a pretty cool company. We don't rewrite the laws of physics, but we do think we execute them to a level that was not thought possible at commercial scale. So we do that in a few different ways. Number one, isotope production. We're bringing our plant online as we speak. And that'll be relevant when we talk about fuel recycling, because isotopes actually are a key element of that opportunity. Number two is a stable isotope program where we produce our own starting material, removing that international dependence. Number three is the separation technologies, and that's where we get into HALEU. We're in the midst of, with the help of the folks here at INL, with the help of the folks at Hill Air Force Base, we'll be scaling up our first HALEU production facility. We'll be delivering customer samples here in 2026, and we'll be delivering production quantities starting in Q1 27. A key element of that stability is twofold for me. One is domestic stability. We'll have, for all of our technologies, we have 100% domestic supply chain. That was important a few years ago. That's extra important now for the reasons stated for sure. Number two is because of the efficiency of our technology, we'll be able to do it at price points that we think enable markets. As we talk to our customers in the SMR place, we think there's that, the $25,000 a kilogram and the like for HALEU is not a sustainable price to enable that hyper growth that we need. We think it's got to be down at the $10,000, $12,000 level and getting lower, frankly. So that's our goal. That's what we're going to start out delivering. That's not something that's going to be a 5 or 10-year goal, but that's our mission. And we feel like that's our obligation for how we commercialize that. Thank you.
Great. Well, diving into some of the policy topics here, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but some of the recent executive orders and federal actions coming out around nuclear, how has the current policy developments sort of shaped the landscape here for the fuel cycle?
Yeah, no, this is honestly for our industry, it's been a big change over the last several months. It's things like actually let's say the last couple of years. I mean, what really started was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia is a major supplier of uranium conversion and enrichment to the United States and the rest of the world. They use a lot of their Cold War infrastructure that was transferred essentially over to Rosatom. That's the state-owned Russian nuclear company. They saw, I think, a bit of a vacuum created with the United States and other countries kind of stepping away from uranium and nuclear fuel and all that, and they filled that vacuum. And they became, frankly, a low-cost, long-term, quite reliable supplier. If you talk to nuclear utilities in the U.S. and abroad, they at that time, let's say pre-Ukraine, they were very pleased with their Russian relationships. Well, that all changed when Russia invaded Ukraine. A lot of these utilities had grown extremely dependent on Russian uranium. If you recall, at that time, there was almost an immediate ban on Russian oil, gas, and coal and other imports and sanctions and all that. It took I believe it was almost over 2 years for the Russian uranium ban to actually be passed by Congress and signed into law. And even with that Russian uranium ban, there's waivers. So even today, we are still importing a whole lot of Russian uranium into the United States. But that is going away here in the next couple of years. That has been a big driver for prices of uranium and, well, SWU, separative work units for enrichment and conversion and all that has gone up considerably because that's really where Russia has a stranglehold. But also, uranium, U-308, the natural uranium that we produce, that's also gone up considerably. And utilities have been self-sanctioning. I think they saw a lot of risk in continuing that dependency on Russia, and so they've been voluntarily reducing their Russian imports. That's been good for us in the fuel cycle. Now, there's been some very minor indications of increased uranium imports from China. Again, we're not out there throwing up the alarm bells quite yet, but still, we got to make sure that we don't trade Russian dependence for Chinese dependence. And so no, that's been a big policy change that we've seen. There's been increased talk. I mean, Secretary Wright just last week talked about resuming the Russian uranium, the strategic uranium reserve. This was an initiative that President Trump championed in his first term. He wanted to see $150 million per year for 10 years, so $1.5 billion to create a strategic uranium reserve. That got appropriated $75 million one time, and that was it. We sold about 300,000 pounds into that uranium reserve, but Secretary Wright just made allusion to that last week, which I think we'd be very, very supportive of. But that's just a couple of things off the top of my mind.
Sure. Maybe I'll just I wanted to set the stage on domestic capabilities in general, maybe picking up on that point. I mean, just for our current fleet of light water reactors, we do enrichment for about a third of the SWUs in your facility domestically. Everything else is imported. Mining is less than 10%. Conversion, we have one plant. A lot of these challenges for our light water fleet, if we look across domestic capabilities, exist. And now we're talking about advanced reactors and recycling and deployment of a whole new infrastructure around high-assay low-enriched uranium. And so I think it's important for us to realize we're in a really dramatic situation where there's going to be a lot of moving parts and pieces. And I think it's important to maybe highlight two areas in the executive orders, going back to the question, that I think will, have even a larger impact on this country over the next couple of years. And one is actually on recycling. So in the executive orders, there is conversations about basically reevaluating recycling spent fuel, not just for the uranium, but for some other valuable transuranics. Historically, it's been not necessarily fully supported at the administration level. And so that's an area where we at INL have done a lot of recycling and reprocessing activities. We're currently doing that. I think we're going to see a big shift in that area. And then also on the very back end, there's some specific language in the executive orders to develop a comprehensive spent fuel management plan for this country to include storage, disposal, as well as include recycling and reprocessing and impacts from that. So I think we're going to see a lot of change going forward as these advanced reactors come online, and we see how these executive orders roll out, or not roll out, but implementation rolls out.
Yeah, I think just adding, I think the executive orders, by prioritizing nuclear power as a key form of baseload power for the country to meet these enormous demands in technology and industrial, capital-intensive industries, et cetera, is the combination of prioritizing the importance of nuclear as baseload power together with including timelines and objectives, goals, is very important. I think it was mentioned yesterday, there is a sort of a forcing function, and I think that we as a company have already seen an increase in fuel contracting to support some of the projects, including the project some of the projects here at INL. And so I think there have been a few announcements by some of those companies. And we also just last week had the first announcement of a commercial enrichment services contract for high-assay low-enriched uranium enriched to the highest level. So I think that it's been a real driver for action in the industry, and where there's been a hesitancy, it's really served a function to move different parts of the industry into action.
Just two incremental things real quick. One is, obviously love all the trend and whatnot in the licensing and regulation, but I think there's a unique opportunity that a lot of these advanced reactors may come with a kind of built-in solution on the concept of recycling as well. So from a licensing perspective, if I was sitting in Washington, I might put prioritization on that and be able to say, gee, somebody who's coming to me with a fully baked solution, maybe I should fast track that. Maybe I should work a little bit with a stronger urgency on that. And that may help me de-risk against future administration changes as well, in terms of ensuring that this mindset and this need we have today is there. The second thing that I would throw in is at a very macro level, and we talked about this a little bit in prior panels, but what's in it for the consumer? Why everybody sees the charts that get thrown up on your favorite news channel about growing demand. All the average consumer knows is that my power bill has gone up 4x, 5x in the last 5 years for no particular reason. And so how does this solve my problem as an individual voter, an individual consumer? That might help with the hearts and minds as well.
And, going back to some of the recycling items that you guys mentioned, are there specific policy levers or other sort of innovations that can incentivize some of what you were talking about beyond within the executive orders?
I mean, I'll jump in front of that if you don't mind. Yeah, won't be the first time I led with my face. So no, I mean, to me, I think it's got to be. I think there's plenty of ideas out there. And there's more than ideas. There's really talented people, both in public and private industry, that have been doing work on this. What the federal level could help with is providing a forum, a safe place, if you will, to work on this. Josh mentioned the concept of even the storage solutions. I mean, just having a little bit more cohesiveness from a federal level would help. I think would help everybody coalesce around the idea of, what do I do with my waste? Where does it go? And if you establish, places like, INL for a public-private partnership, that to me would be a great next step to kind of formalize some of the research around this and help get it to commercial scale.
On sort of the partnerships, collaboration topic, are there specific approaches that have proven successful at building those partnerships? And
I mean, for me, I'll speak to what's about to happen in front of us. So, we're in the midst of finalizing a space right here at INL. That's huge for us because obviously in terms of HALEU production, you can't do that anywhere. So the ability to be able to co-locate and to refine analytical methods, produce customer samples, that's invaluable in terms of our timeline. And it helps us, we can engage with folks who have been doing some of this work, learn from them, accelerate our programs. It's a win-win for us. So again, that public-private, to me, that should be encouraged over and over again.
Yeah, I'll just speak from INL's perspective. We're working with almost every advanced company in the fuel cycle at this point. And because we have unique capabilities that the federal government has invested in over 50, 60 years. So it doesn't make any sense for these companies to replicate those capabilities internally. Come here, work with us. So we're working closely with several companies from a research perspective on how do we demonstrate their technologies. There's certain work that can't be done anywhere other than a national lab. And so we partner through SPPs and CRADAs and other mechanisms and try to get the work out, get it done and get it done quickly. And that's something that I will say on the executive orders, I think we're seeing a real benefit at the laboratory where some of our processes and procedures that are being reevaluated to improve efficiencies and really be responsive to some of these companies. And so I see we're already partnering with these companies, and I see that ramping up significantly over the next 1, 2, 3 years.
I'm going to turn it over to Troy, who has a couple other questions for you, and then we'll do audience questions.
And then we'll go everybody else. You've touched on a little bit on the back end of the cycle, and Mary, I know I was at the committee before you were, and I'm sure you dealt with that too. I feel like we've gone backward with what to do at the tail end of this whole cycle. Like if you were the king, what would you do with a storage disposal final solution for the back end waste?
You might be referring to my past life at DOE and working on spent fuel issues. I'll just say, in terms of the enrichment process, that is not a process that results in high-level radioactive waste. It's low-level material. But as was said, the administration is clearly seeking to relook at the path forward and to try to identify an approach that will work. And so it's a challenge. There are other parts of the world that have been moving forward, and so I think those will be a model for the U.S. And I think it's a part of the fuel cycle that must be addressed, and it's a key issue. But for the upfront enrichment process, it's not a spent fuel issue.
And let me maybe jump in on that. So, one, I don't speak for the Department of Energy, but two, the department is obviously relooking at sort of the strategy for spent fuel recycling storage. One of the things that INL and the lab to bring to the table is we've been dealing with spent fuel for a very long time. We have decades of experience of storing it safely, efficiently, and a lot of the new fuels that are being considered, we have historic fuels that look very, very similar. And so when we talk about storage of spent fuel, I think because it's been done so safely and almost effectively, we've sort of gotten to the point where the government needs to step in, but there's not an emergency on the back end. Because again, with light water reactor fuel, while it's not ideal for it to be stored on site indefinitely, it is safely being stored on site indefinitely without impacting public or safety. And so it's one of those things where as somebody that feels like nuclear energy is going to produce a lot of our power and we need to handle and deal with the waste, in our generation that gets used to that power, I think we need to deal with it. But it's not, I will just frame it, it's not a safety concern to the public for that purpose. We've done it really well. It's just how do we effectively do it going forward?
And if I could jump in real fast on that as well, and this is probably more my personal opinion on spent fuel, having spent 20 years in this industry now. Again, it's spent. I feel like it gets sort of an outsized bit of attention, the spent fuel issue. It is an issue, something we have to deal with long term, but it's not a reason to oppose nuclear energy. I feel like a lot of anti-nuclear people tend to kind of latch onto that as if that's something that can't be solved. It can be solved. Other countries around the world are solving it. We're not drowning in this stuff. It is being safely handled on site. It is an issue, but it's not a huge issue in my view.
I think if it's okay, just one incremental thought, and totally agree with. I mean, we have a great track record as an industry of handling this. I think the burden on private industry, and obviously I drink my own Kool-Aid a little bit. I think there are technologies that might help us get more out of it. And I think that's the question of, yes, we're good staying with the status quo because we know what we can do and we can do it safely. But I think there's a lot of smart people around this room who would agree we can get more out of it. And there's a lot to achieve if we do get it out of it efficiently, meaning either accelerate the remediation, have a complete recycling of it for certain technologies. And that's where I come back to, again, public-private makes a ton of sense, but it's got to start with the regulation. There's got to be, the mothership has to be able to say, it's okay if you take that risk. Don't be afraid to take that risk. That's where our country has drifted a little bit, is that we're just happy not making a mistake. That's not what made this country great.
Since we're offering personal opinions, I'll do one too. And this is not Western governor's policy, but to me, when I was working on this stuff, it always seemed really stupid that we were not recycling, that we were just throwing away 90+% of what was left over. So that maybe has implications for what a final resting place for his stuff. Maybe that gets a lot easier to because you don't have as much thermal loading in there. And that becomes an easier, less expensive thing to take care of at the back end. So I would love to talk about that a lot more. I think it is important to give folks the assurance that we have a plan, and right now we just don't. And that's where I'm coming from. And again, that was personal, not Western governor's policy.
You're fired. No, just kidding. So a couple of things that I've learned over the last couple of days. I'm not one of the smart people in the room. I'm trying here learning. So right now, the federal government spends about $800 million, or is it billion? 800 million, I believe, to the local utilities to basically store their used nuclear waste at their facilities. I was talking to the CEO of Oklo yesterday, and he said that the used nuclear waste, including the naval waste that's at INL, is equivalent to 1.2 trillion barrels of oil. So the question is, do you see companies really, an industry forming, especially with the EOs being signed by President Trump, that will unleash this industry? And secondly, with the EOs, Mary, do you believe that there's going to be a lot more permissiveness in terms of finding new uranium mines, opening up more? And do we actually have uranium mines, other places where we have a lot of uranium in this country that you think have not been yet tapped? So those two questions.
Sure. Yeah. I was going to respond to the mining and the recycling the used fuel. I hope so. I hope we start to use that fuel. I agree with you. We have all this used fuel that has a lot of energy still left in it. From our perspective as a uranium miner, you see all these projections about growth and nuclear and all that. It's going to take a lot of uranium. I'm not sure where all that uranium is going to come from, quite frankly. You have mines that have been operating for the last, many, many years. They're depleting. That's just how mining works. You use it, you deplete it. You don't have another Kazakhstan popping up out of the ground, right? You have some big mines in Canada. You have Cigar Lake, that's owned by Cameco, big high grade, low cost uranium mine, but that has a finite life. There's a couple of projects behind it that could replace it. I think it's going to take kind of all of the above, both recycling and new mining. And when it comes to mining, as with anything, it's economics. I mean, uranium is extremely common in the Earth's crust. It's as common as tin, right? I'll pretty much guarantee anyone, if you go out in your backyard, pick up a handful of dirt, it's got some uranium molecules in it. It's in our human body, right? But that doesn't mean it's economic to recover it. We could recover uranium out of seawater if the price was high enough. And so a lot of it boils down to economics, and also let's recycle. Let's use stuff that's already been mined and manufactured. So the U.S. does have good uranium deposits, and certainly we need a healthy domestic industry for military and defense. For naval propulsion and all that. That material has to be mined, converted, enriched, and fabricated here in the United States for that purpose. So you need at least some semblance of a domestic uranium mining industry, and we can certainly fulfill that role.
I would maybe in response to your question, one of the executive orders is entitled Revitalizing the Industrial Base. And so that is actually quite focused on the fuel cycle and on strengthening and expanding sort of all aspects of the nuclear fuel cycle. I will say, as was said earlier, that one of the really critical prerequisites for building out the fuel cycle, and it applies mining, conversion, enrichment, and with the new advanced fuels, deconversion, is the Russian uranium ban, which really for so long Russian supply had, while it had been limited under something called the Russian Suspension Agreement, which was entered into in the early 1990s and was, I think, one of the longest standing suspension agreements ever entered into by the U.S. There was a limitations on how much material could come into the U.S., but it really did serve to hold back the build out expansion of facilities here in the U.S. And so one of the executive orders is very much focused on trying to support expansion across the fuel cycle. And I think the Department of Energy is working to help to support expansion of the fuel cycle through a number of procurements that are pending. And they're a very important part of it, of course, and really maybe the most important part of it is that you will get an expanded fuel cycle when you have commercial contracts that underpin those investments. So these are all very, very capital intensive investments, and it's very important to know that those investments are not going to be stranded in the future, and that's why the uranium ban is so important. So it gives some certainty to suppliers and to the market. So really, the development of commercial contracts to support the build out of the fuel supply is very important, and that is happening. And so I think we will see expansion of the fuel cycle, and clearly there's a very, very strong support across the government agencies that are engaged on fuel cycle issues, from the Department of Energy to Commerce to State Department. I will say one other kind of federal policy that I do think is important, and it's come up a little bit earlier today and even yesterday, is the federal engagement with allied countries as well. And I know that's something that has been very important to the fuel cycle, in particular. A couple of years ago, as there was an effort to transition away from reliance on Russia, as part of the G7 meetings, there was something called the Sapporo 5, which included the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, France, and Japan, and they have been working together to collaborate on strengthening the fuel cycle across Western countries, and DOE's played a very large role in that. I think, as was mentioned earlier, just last week, there was an announcement of a technology partnership between the U.S. and the UK. At the center of that is civil nuclear energy. And so those partnerships are going to continue to be important. And I know that they exist at the state level too. I think Utah has an agreement with the United Kingdom. And So all of that is important because it is it does continue to be a global marketplace for the supply of some key components and things like that.
Let me just, if you don't mind, jump in on the recycling piece. So setting the stage, I mean, we don't recycle in this country because it's not economic to recycle in this country. And that's because the uranium prices are relatively cheap compared to what it would cost to recover that uranium or, a different transuranic and put that into the fuel cycle. And it's not just the reprocessing facility itself, but it's the impacts of using the material that's recycled in the whole fuel cycle. So you have a different fuel fabrication requirements when you take recovered material, reprocessed material, versus when you have virgin uranium from the ground. So there's other challenges along the way, and historically this is all driven by economics. It's not really a technology perspective. I mean, again, there was at one point, 50 years ago, a ban for about 18 months on recycling, but if you look at why we haven't done that now, it's an economic thing. And so as we start looking at new advanced reactors that have different fuels and different fuel needs, I think there's a real excitement about recycling the material with these other sort of fuel cycles. So our light water reactors, while it'd be great if we could recycle some of that material, economically hasn't made a lot of sense. But as we start looking at advanced reactors, high temperature reactors, molten salt reactors, all these other reactors out there that could potentially use some of the fuel as input, as fuel, as new fuel, I think there's a lot of excitement there. So I want to frame it that recycling was not done for economic reasons historically with our light water fleet, and we have an opportunity to sort of change that. And maybe one other point, since you brought up the Sapporo 5 and some of the investments the department is making on the front end of the fuel cycle, I do think that Congress has appropriated here domestically over $3.5 billion looking at enrichment and conversion. That those funds have not been sort of provided yet to industry. I hope that happens very soon. And when that does, I really hope that can really establish the demand signal for those investments that some of these companies are looking for. So I just want to bring that up as well.
Thank you very much. Richard McPherson. I spent 4 years at the International Atomic Energy Agency on a special six-nation group set up to study nuclear fuel cycle facilities. I'd been to almost every one in the world. At the time, my last paper that I wrote there, I said that we are 4 decades behind in the United States with producing electricity from uranium, and we have big uranium problems. Today, we're 7 decades behind in producing electricity from uranium, and we're much further behind. Thank you for everything you guys are doing.
Thanks. It's a great conversation. We've had a lot of discussion of how this is a remarkable bipartisan moment right now in support of nuclear. And I'm curious your thoughts on, this is a bit of a follow-up on one of Curtis's points about the potential future need for more uranium mining. So set aside maybe the possibility of the recycling obviates that to some degree, but assuming that we will still need more out of the ground. Curtis and I were talking yesterday about Coles Hill, Virginia. We both have kind of a relationship and a history there. And there's still a moratorium in Virginia for this massive deposit. And I'm curious, as the politics of nuclear writ large have changed, are you seeing the politics about uranium mining change at all? It doesn't necessarily follow, I don't think, that because everybody supports nuclear, and now everybody supports uranium mining. And I hope that they're changing, but I'm curious your observation on that. A lot of these seem to be very parochial, well, I like nuclear, we need more of it, but I don't want you to go into my backyard in a way that, in Virginia, the concern was that it would impact Virginia Beach's water quality, right? And there are probably similar concerns around other parts of the country where uranium mining is certainly a possibility in theory. And so curious if you're seeing that change at all, or you're having those conversations with people that are saying we can do it safely now, and is the public perception shifting?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, it's one of those things, almost in any industry, people want the results of all this wonderful technology, but, they don't want, I don't know, the icky stuff you have to do to get there, right? The mining, the processing, the mineral processing, and all the manufacturing, right? When it comes to uranium mining, and again, you mentioned Coles Hill. That is actually, believe it or not, the largest uranium deposit in the United States is in Virginia. It's not in the Western United States. It's something like 200 million pounds of U-308 in the ground. It would supply the U.S. nuclear industry for 4 or 5 years just by itself. But people have, I'd say, a concern about uranium mining, like they would almost with any mining. There is sort of this long history of uranium mining in the United States, particularly in the Southwest United States, during the Cold War, when essentially the uranium industry was a government-sponsored weapons program. The U.S. government needed uranium for nuclear weapons to counter the Soviet Union. They were the only buyer of uranium, and so they essentially incentivized miners to go out with a pickup truck and a Geiger counter to try to find uranium you could go sell to the government. And there was a lot of mess that was left behind, particularly impacted tribal nations, honestly, like the Navajo Nation and others. And they're dealing with those issues even today. And again, that was in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. It was a long time ago, but it impacts our industry today, and memories are long. If you go down, particularly on Navajo Nation, you'll talk to people where, oh, my uncle, my grandfather worked in a uranium mine and he died, or I live out here and there's a uranium mine over there and it's continuing to pollute my groundwater, right? There are big issues that we have to overcome. And so, we're just a small company. We're certainly doing our part to try to change those perceptions. We actually signed an agreement with the Navajo Nation recently, which was honestly maybe one of the prouder moments of my career, to tell you the truth. To help them with the cleanup of some of those old legacy mines that we had nothing to do with, but also to try to just build this trust and to show not just them, but everybody in the public that uranium mining, just like any mining, can be done properly. It can be. We do it to the highest standards here in the United States. And if you stop it here, all you're going to do is push it overseas to places where they don't do it as well as we do here in the United States. And our White Mesa Mill down in southeast Utah is the most heavily regulated, safest, most protective uranium processing facility in the world. I can say that with confidence. We've seen these facilities all over the world, and it is the best. And we still see opposition to mining. When it comes to deposits, we can't help where the uranium is, right? We didn't put it there, but that is the most economic, you have to go after the most economic, cost-effective deposits. Like it or not, some of America's best uranium deposits are near the Grand Canyon. I personally wish they weren't there just because of the public perception and all that, but these are little tiny mines that are very, very high grade. They're very cost effective to produce, totally protective of the environment and groundwater and all that stuff. But again, like the Grand Canyon, it's a landmark. I love it almost more than anything in the world. If I thought we were going to harm the Grand Canyon, I couldn't work for this company. But again, it's a process. I would love to see state and federal governments take a more active role in promoting the safety and the regulation and the features of modern uranium mining, and how it can be done properly. Again, we're just one little company. We do what we can, but we need more.
Do we have time for one more? Okay.
Thank you. As a novice to the nuclear fuel cycle, my question might be juvenile, but you were talking about you being just one little company. I wonder if you could speak to some of the barriers to entrance in the mining industry for specifically uranium production, and in the broader fuel cycle in general. What are the biggest barriers?
Yeah, and I won't speak too much to this. I'll let some of the other panelists speak on this as well. I would say that the days of the mom and pop uranium mining company are over. If you go back to the Cold War days, you could literally just be a guy and a couple of crew, and you could go open up a uranium mine on federal land or on private land and start selling to the government. The barriers to entry, it is regulation, environmental, health, safety. Regulation, it takes a lot, and it should. I'm not up here to argue for reduced regulation. I'm really not. But it does create some barriers to entry. It is expensive to build a mill. Our White Mesa mill, it would probably cost $400 or $500 million just to replicate that. I don't know how long the permitting process, if it could be done at all, to permit a new uranium mill, but probably 10, 15 years or something like that. Elsewhere, and again, I don't think we're going to be, and I may shoot my colleagues in the industry might shoot me for this, but I don't think we're going to be energy independent when it comes to uranium in the United States. We probably can, but I just am not sure there's the public and political will to do that. But I'm okay if we import from Canada and Australia and some of these other allied countries. I have a big problem with importing from Russia and China and Kazakhstan and those kinds of places. But if you can raise some money and there is funding to go into mining companies to open mines, and if you have a good economic deposit, you can certainly get into this industry.
Just from more from the enrichment perspective, as was said, it is very capital intensive, and so we need. So that is a challenge. There are also sort of other aspects of operating an enrichment facility that are very important. It was mentioned earlier, the workforce, the training, the quality assurance, all of the aspects of operating a facility are very complex, and they do require a very well-established quality assurance program and other programs that will help to ensure that the plant is operated as it is appropriately. And there are also safeguard security issues that have to be addressed as well. So the operation of some of these facilities is it's heavily regulated. It does require licensing. It is important to be able to work with the states. Our own facility, we have the NRC licensing, which is very important. But in addition, as we expand, there are state level permitting requirements, construction permits, water permits, all of that. So it really does require sort of at all levels, regulators working together to help to support the development of these facilities. And so that's why it's so important that where they're developed, there is strong state support.
All right, please join me in thanking our panelists for this panel.